The final moments are captured on video. A Boeing -8 Quattrocento turboprop approaching Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu, Nepal. The aircraft should be lined up with the runway, descending smoothly on a stabilized approach. Instead, it weaves erratically through the sky, banking left then right, altitude fluctuating wildly. Air traffic controllers watch in horror as the aircraft veers off course, its movements becoming increasingly unstable and aggressive. Inside the cockpit, chaos. The captain is screaming, shouting incoherently, his voice distorted with rage and panic. He is yanking the controls violently, overriding the first officer's attempts to stabilize the aircraft. He is not flying, he is fighting. Fighting the controls, fighting his first officer, fighting reality itself. And then, in full view of airport cameras and witnesses on the ground, the aircraft banks sharply to the right. The wing drops, the nose pitches down, and the -8 slams into the ground beside the runway in a massive fireball. 51 people die in the crash. 20 survive, many with catastrophic injuries. Before I explain what happened in that cockpit, if you want to hear more real aviation disaster stories analyzed from a pilot's perspective, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. What I am about to share with you is one of the most disturbing cockpit recordings ever recovered, and it reveals failures that should shock every person who has ever stepped onto an aircraft. I am Captain Paul Henderson. In my 25 years of flying commercial jets, I have dealt with mechanical failures, severe weather, medical emergencies, and countless challenging situations. But what happened aboard US-Bangla Airlines Flight 211 represents something far more terrifying than any mechanical problem or weather phenomenon. This was a complete psychological breakdown of a pilot in command, an emotional and mental collapse that unfolded in real time while he was responsible for the lives of 70 people. This is the story of how a captain's erratic behavior, his smoking in the cockpit, his screaming and emotional instability, his refusal to listen to his first officer or air traffic control, led directly to one of the most preventable crashes in aviation history. And it is a story that raises uncomfortable questions about pilot mental health screening, cockpit authority gradients, and what happens when the person in the left seat becomes the greatest threat to everyone aboard. Welcome aboard. March 12, 2018, a Monday afternoon, Shah Jalal International Airport in Dhaka, Bangladesh, US-Bangla Airlines. Flight 211 is preparing for departure to Kathmandu, Nepal. It is a routine international flight, operated multiple times per week, carrying a mix of Bangladeshi and Nepalese passengers, along with some international travelers. The flight time is approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes, a short hop across the border into the Himalayas. The aircraft is a Bombardier -8 Quattrocento, registration Sierra 2 India Golf Papa. It is a turboprop regional airliner, capable of carrying up to 78 passengers. This particular aircraft is 9 years old with approximately 22,000 hours on the airframe. Mechanically, it is in good condition. The pre-departure inspection reveals no deficiencies. There is nothing wrong with this airplane. 67 passengers board. Bangladeshi business people heading to meetings in Kathmandu. Nepalese workers returning home after visiting family in Dhaka. A few tourists beginning treks in the Himalayas. They settle into their seats, unaware that they are about to experience the most terrifying hour of their lives and that many of them will not survive it. The crew consists of 2 pilots and 4 cabin crew members. First Officer Prithula Rashid occupies the right seat. She is 25 years old, relatively new to commercial aviation with approximately 390 hours of total flight time. This is only her 4th flight as a line pilot after completing her training. She is nervous, still learning, still gaining confidence, but she is competent, careful, following procedures exactly as she was taught. In the left seat is Captain Abid Sultan. He is 52 years old, with over 5,000 hours of flight time. He has been flying for US-Bangla for several years. On paper, he is vastly more experienced than his first officer. He should be the steady hand, the calm professional guiding the junior pilot. But Captain Abid Sultan is not well. Not today. Perhaps not for some time. And over the next 75 minutes, his deteriorating mental state will become increasingly apparent to everyone who interacts with him. The first signs of trouble appear even before departure. During the pre-flight preparation, Sultan is irritable, snapping at First Officer Rashid over minor issues. His mood is volatile, swinging between withdrawn silence and sudden anger. Rashid notices, but says nothing. She is new. He is the captain. She does not feel she has the authority to question his behavior. At 1:15 in the afternoon local time, Flight 211 pushes back from the gate. Sultan is designated as the pilot flying for this leg. Rashid will handle radio communications and monitor the flight. They taxi toward the departure runway. During taxi, air traffic control gives them routing instructions. Sultan acknowledges, but then immediately questions the routing, arguing with controllers about the assigned departure procedure. His tone is aggressive, confrontational. Controllers are confused by his hostility, but provide the clearance he requests. At 1:35 they are cleared for takeoff. Sultan advances the power levers. The Dash 8 accelerates down the runway and lifts off smoothly. The departure itself is technically satisfactory, but Sultan's radio communications continue to be curt and aggressive. As they climb toward their cruising altitude, First Officer Rashid notices something disturbing. Captain Sultan lights a cigarette in the cockpit. Smoking in the cockpit is prohibited by company policy and by international aviation regulations. It has been banned for decades due to fire risk and the impairment it causes to judgment and reaction time. Rashid is shocked but does not know how to respond. He is the captain, he is in command. She is a junior first officer on only her 4th flight. How can she tell him to stop? What if he becomes angry? What if he retaliates against her career? So she says nothing, and Sultan continues smoking, filling the confined cockpit with smoke, violating regulations with complete disregard for the rules or for his first officer's discomfort. The flight proceeds toward Kathmandu. The weather at their destination is challenging. Tribhuvan International Airport sits in a valley surrounded by high terrain, with mountains rising to over 25,000 feet nearby. Approaches require careful navigation and strict adherence to published procedures, but the weather itself is acceptable, with visibility sufficient for landing. As they approach Nepalese airspace, Sultan's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. He is argumentative on the radio. He questions air traffic control instructions repeatedly. His voice is agitated, sometimes angry, sometimes confused. Controllers begin to notice that something is wrong with this crew. Kathmandu. Approach control provides them with approach clearance and instructions. Sultan acknowledges but then immediately deviates from the clearance, turning the wrong direction. Controllers correct him. He argues. They repeat the instruction. He finally complies, but his tone is hostile. First Officer Rashid is becoming seriously concerned now. Her captain is not flying normally. He is not communicating professionally. He is not following instructions. She tries gently to assist, to remind him of procedures, but he snaps at her to be quiet. The cockpit voice recorder captures the deteriorating situation. Sultan is smoking continuously now, multiple cigarettes. The cockpit reeks of smoke. He is muttering to himself between radio calls. His speech is becoming increasingly disjointed and aggressive. As they begin the approach to Kathmandu, things spiral completely out of control. Sultan is given vectors to intercept the final approach course for runway 02, but he becomes confused about his position. He cannot seem to understand where he is relative to the airport. The approach controllers provide constant updates, trying to guide him, but he is not processing the information correctly. Turn left heading 040, the controller instructs. Sultan turns right instead. Negative, turn left, left turn to 040, the controller repeats urgently. Sultan argues on the radio, insisting he is correct. Rashid tries to intervene, pointing to the instruments showing they are turning the wrong way. Sultan shouts at her to shut up, that he knows what he is doing. The aircraft is now completely out of position for the approach. They are too high, too fast, and not aligned with the runway. Any trained pilot would recognize this and execute a go-around, climbing away to set up for another attempt. But Sultan refuses. He is determined to land, to force this approach to work, regardless of how unstable it has become. Controllers watching on radar can see the aircraft weaving erratically. They call multiple times, offering to vector the crew for another approach. Sultan refuses. He is screaming now, both at air traffic control and at his first officer. His voice on the cockpit recorder is barely recognizable as human speech, just incoherent shouting mixed with cursing. Rashid is pleading with him. "Captain, we need to go around. We are not stable." "Captain, please, go around." Sultan responds with more screaming. He is yanking the control column violently, making aggressive inputs that send the aircraft lurching through the sky. The Dash 8 banks sharply left, then right. The nose pitches up, then down. Altitude fluctuates wildly. This is not flying, this is thrashing. In the cabin, passengers are terrified. The violent maneuvers throw them against their seatbelts. Overhead, bins pop open. Items fall from storage. People are crying, praying, holding onto their seats. The cabin crew, strapped into their jump seats, can only watch in horror, having no idea what is happening in the cockpit, but knowing that something is terribly, terribly wrong. On the ground, airport cameras are recording everything. Video footage shows the Dash 8 approaching the airport in completely unstable flight. The aircraft is wobbling, banking excessively, clearly out of control. Airport emergency services, watching the approach, immediately activate full emergency response. Fire trucks and ambulances rush toward the runway area. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Rashid makes one final desperate attempt to save the situation. She reaches for the controls, trying to take over, trying to stabilize the aircraft and execute a go-around. But Sultan physically fights her, shoving her hands away, screaming that he is in command. The aircraft is now less than 200 feet above the ground, approaching the runway threshold. But they are not aligned with the runway. They are coming in at an angle too fast, too unstable. The ground proximity warning system is screaming, "Pull up, pull up, pull up!" Sultan ignores the warning. He continues his aggressive, erratic inputs. The aircraft banks sharply to the right. The right wing drops toward the ground. Rashid is screaming now, begging Sultan to pull up, to climb, to save them. But it is too late. The Dash 8 impacts the ground beside the runway in an open area near the airport perimeter. The right wing hits first, absorbing enormous force. The impact tears the wing from the fuselage. The aircraft cartwheels, breaking apart as it tumbles across the ground. Fuel ignites immediately, engulfing the wreckage in flames. The crash is catastrophic. The fuselage breaks into multiple sections. Seats are torn from their mountings. Passengers are thrown violently as the aircraft disintegrates around them. Fire spreads rapidly through the wreckage. Emergency crews rush to the scene. They pull survivors from the burning wreckage, working frantically as flames and smoke hamper rescue efforts. Some passengers, incredibly, walk away from the crash with only minor injuries. Others are pulled from the wreckage unconscious or severely injured. And some, tragically, are already dead, killed instantly by the impact or trapped in sections of fuselage that are fully engulfed in flames. The final toll is devastating. 51 people dead, including both pilots and 2 cabin crew members. 20 survivors, many with life-changing injuries, an entire aircraft destroyed, families shattered, all because of one pilot's complete psychological breakdown in the cockpit. If you are as disturbed by this as I am, go ahead and hit that like button, and make sure you stay subscribed, because we need to talk about the investigation findings and the changes this disaster forced upon the industry. Also, please share this video, because pilot mental health is something every passenger should understand. The investigation that follows is exhaustive and deeply troubling. Nepalese authorities, assisted by Canadian investigators from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada and representatives from Bombardier, examine every aspect of the flight. They recover the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. The data is damning. The audio is disturbing. The cockpit voice recorder captures over an hour of increasingly erratic behavior by Captain Sultan. It records him smoking. It records him arguing with air traffic control. It records him screaming at his first officer. It records his complete loss of situational awareness during the approach. It records First Officer Rashid's desperate attempts to intervene, to take control, to save the aircraft. And it records the final moments, the ground proximity warning, the screaming, the impact. Investigators interview survivors and witnesses. They review Sultan's background, his training records, his medical history, his recent behavior. What they discover paints a picture of a pilot who should never have been in that cockpit that day. Sultan had a history of emotional instability and aggressive behavior. Multiple colleagues at US-Bangla had witnessed outbursts, mood swings, and unprofessional conduct. He had been involved in previous incidents where his behavior was questioned. But the airline had taken no substantive action. He had never been grounded for psychological evaluation. He had never been required to undergo counseling or treatment. His smoking in the cockpit was apparently a regular occurrence, witnessed by multiple first officers who flew with him, but none had reported it, either out of fear of retaliation or because of the strong authority gradient that makes it difficult for junior crew members to challenge senior captains. In the days leading up to the accident flight, Sultan's behavior had become even more erratic. He had been involved in an argument with a colleague. His mood had been volatile. Multiple people who interacted with him noted that he seemed emotionally unstable. On the day of the flight, he should not have reported for duty. He was clearly not in a fit mental state to operate an aircraft. But he showed up, signed in, and was allowed to fly because nobody with the authority to stop him recognized the danger or was willing to confront him. The investigation determines the probable cause of the accident, the captain's severe emotional and psychological distress, leading to complete loss of control during the approach. Contributing factors include his smoking in the cockpit, his refusal to follow air traffic control instructions, his aggressive and erratic behavior, and the first officer's inability to effectively intervene due to the steep authority gradient. But the investigation also identifies systemic failures at US-Bangla Airlines. The airline had inadequate screening for pilot mental health issues. They had no effective reporting system for behavioral problems. They had no mechanism for crew members to confidentially report concerns about a colleague's fitness to fly. The company culture discouraged speaking up about safety concerns, especially when those concerns involved senior captains. In the aftermath of this tragedy, significant changes were implemented, though not as comprehensively as some safety advocates hoped. US-Bangla Airlines was required to enhance its pilot psychological screening and establish confidential reporting systems. The Civil Aviation Authority of Bangladesh mandated more frequent mental health evaluations for all commercial pilots. Internationally, the accident renewed focus on pilot mental health monitoring and the challenges of authority gradient in cockpits. Airlines were encouraged to create cultures where junior crew members feel empowered to speak up about safety concerns without fear of retaliation. But the uncomfortable truth is that accidents like this one are difficult to prevent entirely. Mental health can deteriorate rapidly. Pilots who are stable 1 month may be struggling the next, and the culture of aviation, which values strength and competence, can make it difficult for pilots to admit they are having problems. For me, as a pilot, and as someone who has spent decades in cockpits, this accident is profoundly disturbing on multiple levels. First, there is the obvious tragedy of 51 preventable deaths. But beyond that, there is the violation of trust. When passengers board an aircraft, they are placing absolute trust in the pilots. They trust that we are properly trained, medically fit, mentally stable, and committed to their safety above all else. That trust is sacred. It is the foundation of commercial aviation, and Captain Sultan violated that trust in the most complete and catastrophic way possible. First Officer Rashid was placed in an impossible situation. She recognized that her captain was not fit to fly. She tried to intervene. She tried to take control. But the authority gradient, the cultural expectation that junior officers defer to senior captains, prevented her from acting decisively until it was too late. She died trying to save that aircraft, fighting against her own captain to prevent the crash. She was a hero who deserved so much better than to have her life ended by the very person who was supposed to be leading and protecting the crew. To any pilot reading this, please, if you are struggling with your mental health, seek help. There are confidential resources available. There are peer support programs. There are mental health professionals who specialize in aviation. Your career may seem like the most important thing in your life, but it is not worth dying for, and it is certainly not worth killing others for. And to airlines and regulators, this accident demonstrates that we need better systems for identifying and grounding pilots who are not mentally fit to fly. We need cultures that encourage reporting without fear. We need regular psychological evaluations that go beyond the superficial checkbox exercises that many pilots currently undergo. The video of Flight 211's final moments, captured by airport cameras and bystanders, circulated widely on the internet after the crash. It shows the Dash 8 weaving through the sky, banking erratically, clearly out of control. It shows the final moments before impact. It is disturbing to watch, knowing that inside that aircraft were terrified passengers and a desperate first officer fighting to save them, while her captain actively prevented her from doing so. US-Bangla Airlines Flight 2, 1-1 should never have crashed. Those 51 people should never have died. Captain Sultan should never have been allowed in that cockpit that day. First Officer Rashid should have been empowered to ground him or to take control earlier. The airline should have had systems in place to prevent this, but they did not. And 51 people paid the price for those failures. This story is difficult to hear, but it is important that we learn from it. If this video opened your eyes to the critical issue of pilot mental health and cockpit safety culture, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real aviation stories. Give this video a like to help spread awareness about these issues, and share it with anyone who cares about aviation safety, because silence about these problems costs lives. Your engagement helps me continue investigating and sharing these crucial stories. I am Captain Paul Henderson. Thank you for staying with me through this deeply disturbing story. Remember that aviation safety depends not just on technical competence and following procedures, but on mental fitness, emotional stability, and the courage to speak up when something is wrong. Fly safe, take care of your mental health, and never be afraid to ground yourself or a colleague when safety is at risk. Until next time, this is Captain Paul Henderson, signing off.